Welcome back to Highly Respected. I'm your host, Scott Greer. So, a couple housekeeping things today before I jump into the topics. I became a target of big tech censorship this week. The liberal group Sleeping Giants decided to tag my podcast providers and to complain that I'm a white supremacist who used to work with neo-Nazi Richard Spencer, which is weird that they would go after a fellow Biden voter and Richard Spencer like that, but yeah, so they got me kicked off my, Spotify and my podcast provider, which they didn't even tag necessarily in their tweet thread. They went after all these people that my RSS feed had, populated the podcast in. So the RSS feed is down. I will have a new one up soon enough, probably next week. So for the next episode, we will have an RSS feed. A lot of people keep messaging me like, "Where's the new episode? Where's the new episode?" It's like, yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, RSS feed's down, so it's not populating. But we will have a new one shortly enough, and we will fight back against big tech censorship. They will not delete us. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, I also said on the last podcast that the next episode would not be about politics. We would talk about culture with a very special guest. Well, I also lied about that. There is so much news that happened this week that I decided to do another solo episode to cover everything that's happened. But next week, we should have the much expected, much desired episode that's about something other than politics. So just keep patient about that. So those are the two things. We'll have a new RSS feed soon enough. And next week, we should have an incredible episode with a very special guest. A final thought on that is that I do want to say that it is pretty incredible that one liberal group with just one tweet can just get people deplatformed. It wasn't even any strikes or anything. And they said, and even the Sleeping Giants, they said nothing that I've said in this podcast or even the last 6 years or so. It was simply that I used to write for Radix, which is something that everybody knows. And they used scare words about me. And thus, that was enough reason to go with it. But these companies are feeling a lot of pressure now on the podcast because New York Times and a couple of other big outlets have been writing about how podcasts allow all this types of hate speech. They're not moderating for hate speech. And as everyone knows who listens to my podcast, there is no hate speech whatsoever on this podcast. Only love speech, only highly respected speech, only the highest IQ of speech. So I think it's actually discrimination against how smart I am. This is really what's about. It's nothing about, white supremacists or anything. They're just really jealous of how tall I am and how smart I am. And they really can't handle me being 6'2", IQ 187. But, we'll let them cope and seethe and we'll carry on. Now we can jump into our regularly scheduled topics we have today. And first up, of course, we have stonks. Everyone's talking about stocks this week. Everyone's becoming a day trader this week. I wonder why. Anyway, we're going to first talk about what happened with the GameStop and AMC populist economic uprising that we're seeing right now and just go over a few things. As you all probably should know, because this is one of the number one news stories in America right now, is that a bunch of people organized on Reddit. This is actually a positive Reddit moment, one of the first times in history, organized a mass buy-in of GameStop in order to screw over hedge funds who are shorting it and expecting to make billions off its downfall. Well, these people decided that they were going to help out these companies, including, and later on, not only just GameStop, but AMC, Blockbuster, Nokia, and a couple of other places where hedge funds were shorting them and expecting to rake in the profits off their demise or off their business failures, rather. So this happened, and I don't want to necessarily get too mired into the details. For one, it's I'm not necessarily a stock market expert. Sorry to those who are expecting that. But there are wider political ramifications going on here. I think the first thing to say is whether you support this or do you not support this. And of course, I support this. There could be more powerful forces behind this that, maybe it's not as populist as we believe. BlackRock is making a killing off this, but I've been informed BlackRock always makes a killing. They never lose. So that's not necessarily a hit against what's going on with the Wall Street bets and the mass surge in the stock market. And there could be, and it's getting to the point where it is getting a little bit cringe. There's a bunch of normies who are getting into it, and it's going to a point where it's almost like Epstein didn't kill himself, where it's like every ordinary Joe is into that. But I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Yes, there are several people who are into this that are, making this like bad. And like Wall Street Bets on Twitter was like celebrating that Jon Stewart was in this, like, whoa, Jon Stewart is celebrating. It's like, ugh. No, don't do that. Don't say that's not a reason to celebrate. But in any case, this is, this is a sign of, populism. This is like the people rising up against our corrupt hedge fund managers, who all these people have been making a killing during the time of the pandemic. They've gotten a bailout. Their lives haven't been ruined. Everything's been going on strong, and they're getting exposed on CNBC when they're lashing out at the people. These like old billionaires are going out and like, you people can't have share the wealth. You hate wealthy people, and I hate this. And like, these people don't understand. And they're going on trying to compare it to the January 6th riots. There are the protests, rather. I prefer saying protests. Or they're saying that this is financial terrorism. It's really exposing these elites for, the greedy, selfish people they are. And it is like, sending a system shock as well. And it does show that the people, and similar to the January 6th, is that people are really mad, and they're really to, hit back at the man in any case they can. I think this is far more effective than going around and wandering around the Capitol, of course. And people are remarking that this is, this has bigger impact than Occupy Wall Street. I probably agree with that. And, you're seeing really the type of backlash that's happening that, the system, it's the emperor has no clothes moment. The system is losing its legitimacy. It always tells people to get into the stock market, that we love free markets. Everybody can do it. And now they're artificially manipulating the market to stop this populist surge, to stop people buying and selling these stocks, trading the stocks rather. They're letting them sell because they're trying to tamp down on the enthusiasm. And it just goes to this links that the system, we always say that we have all this freedom, but we can't even have the freedom to organize, the people to buy and trade stocks on their own terms. You have to go by the terms of the hedge funds. And I think millions of Americans are getting that lesson. So, regardless of whether what impact it is to the stock market, I don't think it's going to necessarily destroy Wall Street. As I was saying, BlackRock is making a lot of money off this, and so are the other bigger firms. But it is hitting back at some of the hedge funds, and these people are definitely worried. If you watch the embassy and all these clips, they're melting down over this stuff and wanting like the federal government to arrest these people, and the federal government may do that. So, Janet Yellen made nearly $1 million in speaking fees from one of the hedge funds that's heavily implicated in this. So that's something to consider. So one of the important things to keep in mind is the backlash and the response to this from the powers that be. And the first thing is that they've tried to portray this as a neo-Nazi, racist, or incel uprising. You've seen many tweets of people complaining about this, and they're really just trying to carry water for the hedge funds. And they're trying to say, oh, this is racist. These guys just need to have sex. This is really bad. And when Discord shut down Wall Street Bets, they used the spurious reason of hate speech. They didn't say, oh, this has nothing to do with financial transactions. This is just all that we're seeing hateful and discriminatory speech, and we just can't allow that. And they always use this reasoning to shut down people, is that, when you threaten, the powers that be, they're just going to claim you're racist or you're spreading hate speech, and they'll shut you down. And this works on a lot of people. And they're using this, and, it's surprising that Robinhood, which shut down trading on, GameStop and AMC and a couple of other stocks, that they just didn't use this reasoning, that these people are racist and we can't let them trade anymore on our platform. So that is like, they continue to always use this reasoning. If they need to shut somebody down, they use racist. And I pointed this out on Twitter, that when the Soviet Union was looking to shut down dissidents in the 30s and 40s, they would always just claim that this person's a fascist. Usually they were just a communist that was, problematic for the regime. So they would just use the term fascist. Well, now we use the term racist, and they always have to find this reasoning. And you see a bunch of journalists trying to dive in to find like the hidden racist meaning of Wall Street bets and these millions of ordinary people who are getting involved in the stock market. And they're using that, and so they'll also use this tax censorship. There's also this collusion that's going on between these hedge funds and these platforms that are supposed to let everyone trade and make the trades they want, and instead they're cooperating to ensure that they can't do that. That the market is literally getting hedged in the favor of the hedge funds and the billionaires against the little guy. And I think a lot of people are seeing that, and they're very mad at Robinhood for a reason, because this is a platform that pretended it to be a populist initiative that will allow everyone, let the people trade, was one of their mottos, and they're not letting the people trade. And the stock market in many cases is getting rigged in favor of the wealthy. And it also goes on to this one response, is that Ben Shapiro was on the side of the hedge funds against the little people, and he was making the complaint that these people don't get it. They're the people who are going after the hedge funds and buying GameStop view the stock market as a casino that's rigged, and you can't win on it. And it's like, well, yeah, it kind of is. And these people are proving that point, and only idiots like Ben Shapiro and others who worship the free market and these billionaires don't get it. Another thing is happening is that the great populist left, populist right realignment is sort of occurring here. I don't want to say it's necessarily occurring, because there are some factors that are showing that it's not occurring, but there is this. Both groups are largely supporting this. That MAGA supporters, the dissident right, are all in favor of this. So are DSA types. So are a lot of liberals in general, except for really the centrists. It really is just Con Inc. Some Con Inc. That I could tell that a lot of conservative Inc. people really don't like this, but they know that their whole fan base is on this and they don't want to get dunked on. So they just say, they try to be above it all and just curious observers rather than take a stand on this. It's very clear that they side with the hedge funds. There's also plenty of centrists and other crazed liberals who believe that they can never stand with. The real problem is racists, not billionaires. So they'll always stand with that. So you are seeing a lot of people who are, both sides are in on this. And I think the right is definitely excited about this due to the realignment possibilities. But once again, as I've said it countless times in the show, is that, the realignment can't happen because ultimately the left use the right and racism, or quote unquote racism, as a bigger issue than billionaires. And even though there are some people on the left who, a few who are willing to, focus on what they really believe in, most of them are actually complaining about the right and racism. And there's several groups, particularly the ones who are, all their lives are spending counting, watching the fascists who are in this, like the account Eyes on the Right, which just writes hit pieces all the time, is like, we can't ally with fascists against oligarchs. And there were several other big left-wing accounts that are like, we can never ally with fascists and oligarchs. They're the real problem. And so there were several other people who were saying this. And the real peak of this was when AOC responded to Ted Cruz. AOC was like, we need to look into this. These people need to be held accountable. Ted Cruz is like, I agree with this. And AOC just said, I will not stand with you. I do not want your support. You tried to get me killed a few days ago, and you should resign and go to prison. I don't know if she said that she should go to prison, but she said there should be consequences outside of resigning. And I will only ally with Republicans who didn't want me to get killed, which she's claiming that the Capitol Hill protest, which posed no real threat to her. I mean, she left. I mean, I don't think any of these rioters were going to do much of anything. And if you've seen the video of the QAnon shaman and everyone going into the Senate hall and the police officers be like, hey, could you guys leave? They're like, oh, we'll think about it. And they're just like goofy. They're walking around without permission. I mean, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, but they're not necessarily a threat. And they're trying to claim that there was like these hit squads going in to try to kill AOC and Ilhan Omar and all these people. That's not even true. But she knows that it gives her power. The media is going to repeat her talking points, and it gives her greater moral stature. But in this case, where she claims that she's against the billionaires, against the wealthy 1%, she's instead taking this moment to signal against Republicans and to whine about some mystery threat that was to her and present herself as the victim, only just to own the right. And ultimately, this does show the thing is that, and also the Republicans who didn't want her killed, i.e. the people who were not challenging the election results, are the ones who are on the side of the hedge funds. Like, okay, yeah, Mitch McConnell and Liz Cheney are certainly going to take on the hedge funds. That's who AOC is saying she wants to align with. You know, these like terrible people who are all about capitalist interests. Yeah, those people are not going to side with you on this economic concern. The only people who are people like Paul Gosar, who's also, calling on investigations and, accountability for the groups involved in this and to shutting down trading. Those are the people who are challenging the election. Those are the really MAGA, America First conservatives. And, a lot of the commentators out there who are always desperate for left-right realignment can really see that this can never happen due to AOC's response to Ted Cruz and many others. I mean, yeah, there are some DSA types who maybe have, let go of their anti-fascism for a few days, but they'll return to it. And ultimately they see us on the right as the bigger threat and as the real enemy rather than billionaires. And, that's their priorities. And AOC showed her priorities that she cares more about virtue signaling than genuine economic populism. So that is something to keep in mind. If the only real realignment can happen is if these people actually become right-wingers, because the left in of itself is an outgrowth of the system, of the elites. Antifa are merely the Dobermans of the system. They're not really, they're no threat to it. And it's really the same with DSA and Elizabeth Warren. None of these people are really threats. And even some of their positions on this aren't really addressing the matter. Like Ilhan Omar called for a tax on Wall Street trades. And, that's actually going to hurt the Wall Street bets people. That's going to hurt the ordinary people. That's not necessarily what the people want. They want a free market where they can operate in a manner that the hedge funds don't want them to operate in, and they just don't get that. So that is one of the political implications of this. There are many, though. So there's a lot of opportunity for a new political figure or a new leader to emerge in this scenario that's playing out before us in the stock market. And I don't really think it's AOC. It's certainly, I think her response to Ted Cruz proved that. It's not really Ted Cruz. Trump, of course, it's really showing how Trump, the deplatforming has hurt Trump, and how he can't tweet and interact with this story. Is that it would be great if we could get his opinion on it, but he has no way of regular communicating. This once again shows that his power is diminishing to an extent. So I have to look, well, who are the people really benefiting this? And it's really people outside of traditional politics. On the person I really think who this may be the beginning or the seeds of a possible presidential run. I don't think they'll run, but it is there is a greater chance of it now. That person is Barstool president, Dave Portnoy. And a lot of people are like, wait a minute, that can't be it. Like, why would you say Dave Portnoy is for president? And a lot of people are noticing that he is one of the leaders going on in this. He's like going all in. He's attacking the hedge funds, attacking Robinhood, attacking these, titans of the Wall Street for, tamping down on the little guy. He does have celebrity power, and you have to look at what Trump has done. Like, Trump has shown that you don't need to hold political office to run. You just need the ability to connect people and to have the star power and high name recognition. And Dave Portnoy has been going on Fox News for years now. He has a way of communicating with a certain, I guess it would be considered right-wing demographic. Center-right would probably be a better way to say this. I mean, Barstool Sports is certainly to the right of ESPN. I don't think it's really to the right or too far to the right. And I think Outkick, with Clay Travis is probably much more right wing, much more conservative than Barstool when it comes to sports media. But it is less woke than ESPN and the rest of the sports industry, and that's why they hate it. I mean, Deadspin absolutely despises Barstool. They love just writing hit pieces on Barstool and Portnoy all the time. So he has this ability to draw controversy. Now, he has also, this isn't the only thing he's been involved in. He's also been helping out countless numbers of small businesses that have been struggling under COVID. and he's been offering them, money and, highlighting their cause and really helping them out and helping them survive, giving him some, really positive credentials among people who are seeing like, oh, this guy's doing a lot of good things. So I think Portnoy is going to get more involved in political issues in the same way that Donald Trump got more involved in political issues in the years before he ran for president. I mean, Trump was really testing the waters, and he, despite his reluctance to get in the presidential race in 2012 and other years, he was somebody who did want to run for president. I don't know necessarily if Portnoy wants to do that. Portnoy's main obsession is sports. He has some political savviness as compared to other, celebrities that people want to run. And he does have a love of controversy and courting controversy that would help him a lot in a presidential election, give him a Trumpian factor, compared to somebody who like a guy like Mike Rowe, who's loved by many conservatives, has that similar level of star power, doesn't like controversy, and always tries to stay in the middle of the road, even though a lot of his messaging is conservative. And he goes on Tucker Carlson, just like Dave Portnoy. He goes on a lot. He's not somebody who's going to do that. Portnoy is somebody like that, and he does like insulting people and, being confrontational in a manner that is very similar to Trump. The one thing that I would say or not just one thing, but the things I would say that about is if he did run for president in 2024, which is so far off, we don't know what will happen, but I do think you will see a lot of these celebrity figures contemplate a run in the 2024 GOP primary, and I think Portnoy may be one of them. He may just have like Portnoy for president as like a marketing gimmick just to like raise more attention to Barstool. That is something that he would do. And I don't necessarily think it's like very likely. I would maybe say it's like a 10% chance he runs. But if he did run, it would be a very different thing from Trump. Is that Trump was ultimately a boomer, and he did connect with a lot of these rural whites. They both watch Fox News all the time. They both have similar beliefs, even though, Trump wasn't necessarily a devout Christian. They still overlooked that and still saw him as a champion. Portnoy is very, I believe he's in his early 40s. He is a Gen Xer. He's not necessarily a boomer. He's not somebody who's like watching Fox News all the time. He doesn't really necessarily understand that kind of base, the rural white base for a lot of Republican politics. And I think they would be turned off by some of his antics. He's also a womanizer like Trump, but he doesn't necessarily have the loving, the big family that goes along with Trump to like say like, yes, I messed around, but look at my family, look at how dedicated to them I am. And that would win over a lot of, Republican-based support. Portnoy doesn't have that. And also, Portnoy, I feel, he is always accused of sexism and misogyny, but the type of things that really made Trump, president was getting into these cultural and identity issues like immigration, like political correctness, the ability to say things about race that you're not allowed to say. I don't think Portnoy would really get into that. They would like say the same things that they said about Trump hating women towards Portnoy, but Portnoy, he would roll with it. I mean, he would probably bring out whatever hot girls work for Barstool to say like, look, I'm not a sexist. I guess that may work, probably not. And, Trump could have done the same thing, but that didn't really work for Trump. And he's not really going to engage in the cultural and identity issues. It would probably be an economic argument. And I can't decide whether it's going to be like cringe libertarianism or economic populism. I mean, because it is somebody I don't think this is somebody who is necessarily going to be sharing the same message with Occupy Wall Street. I have a feeling it would be more something libertarian. But it would be a good test case in seeing that whether it was Trump's persona and his brash attitude that attracted the base to him, or whether it was his policies. Because Portnoy would probably be a lot of the problems we have with Trump, that it's like, oh, it's all the celebrity, it's a circus. He's just about like standard GOP policies, economic policies. He's not actually representing what the base cares about. Some of that was founded and grounded in reality. Some of it, I think, was a little unfair to Trump, and he was doing a lot of things on the immigration front and other areas that no other Republican was going to do. And before Trump, there was no mainstream interest in these ideas, but Trump made it that way. Portnoy, I don't know if he would actually go in that. I think it would be just like a straight economic message that like we need to get America working again, and almost verge on the type of cringe message that Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert were rolling with in the late 2000s, early 2010s in response to the Tea Party. Like, we don't want labels, we just want everyone to come together and work together, and it's this like really bad cringe centrism, but it would be paired with this populist bluster and this confrontational attitude and savaging like conservative ink dorks and Republicans that, you know, maybe it might work out. I think conservative media would be much more appreciative of Portnoy 2024 than they were of Trump 2016. For whatever reason, they hated Trump, and some of that was due to his interest in racial topics and in fighting on cultural and identity issues. While Portnoy, they would probably say he's only focusing on economic stuff. And they're all sports simps, so they don't want to go against Portnoy. And Portnoy has a level of cool that Trump doesn't have. I mean, Barstool Sports is cool. I don't know necessarily if the Celebrity Apprentice was as cool as that, but it is something that they don't want to be seen as nerds for opposing. So they may go along with it and be much more positive. I don't see National Review having an article against Portnoy. Maybe they will, but we'll have to see. Like I said, this is just a speculation, but I do think that Portnoy is somebody who's going to be getting more involved in politics in the next 4 years. And it could be somebody who would run for president. I think, people look at Trump and they see that they want to follow his example. And there's several wealthy people and celebrities who have wanted to follow that lead. But for whatever reason, they know they can't succeed. I think Mark Cuban really wants to be like Trump. He's very jealous of Trump's success, but he would have to run as a Democrat, and he knows he can't win in a Democratic primary. Elon Musk would love to do that, but he wasn't born here, so they would have to change the laws for him. Zuckerberg, of course, wanted to follow that, but everyone hates Zuckerberg, and he was actually considering to run for president. This was a big story in 2017 when he was going around Iowa and visiting random farm families, and it was like these weird PR optics going on. But then, like, the media came down hard on him, and, he realized that everyone hates him and he would never succeed. And now there's this Sri Lankan investor who is running for governor in California, Chemath Palihapitiya. I'm pretty sure I got it. Actually, looking to find how to pronounce his name took me a while, because they like all the clips, they cut off actually pronouncing his name. They just go, hey, what's going on? They're like, say his damn name. Nobody knows how to pronounce this. And he is running for governor of California, but he was born in Sri Lanka. I don't know necessarily if he can run. He's not going to be able to run in 2024, but he is also and he's also heavily involved in the Reddit uprising. So is Elon Musk, and they are getting more clout and credibility due to that. And maybe that might help Chamath to run in California, which in the recall election against Gavin Newsom, maybe he might become the next governor of California on a left-wing populist message. That might work, and maybe that'll pave the way for somebody to run on that message against Kamala or whoever they decide to put forward in 2024 for the Democrats. So, it'll be interesting to see what celebrities want to, follow Trump's path and get in. I think out of all the people on the Republican side, I think the most likely is Dave Portnoy. He does connect with a lot of Republicans, a lot of Republican voters. He is sort of moving towards the right due to his many appearances on Tucker Carlson. He is gaining some, mainstream respect due to what he's doing for small businesses and his initiatives. And he does have a very Trumpian bluster, and he and Trump get along a lot. But there is like a different matter. I don't think he's going to deal with the cultural and identity issues. And it would be Trumpism as an economic policy rather than the cultural war fight. So I don't know necessarily if we'll support him. It could be something that we really hate. We could end up hating Portnoy if he ran for president. The dissident right could end up very much hating Dave Portnoy. So it's something to keep an eye on. But that is it to talk about the stocks and the Reddit uprising. So one of the other big things to happen this week was a man was arrested for memes. And that man was none other than Douglas Mackey, the famous Ricky Vaughn account from 2016. I'm sure many of you followed him and loved his work. And he was considered one of the most influential political tweeters. There was somebody put out a list, and he was very much high up far higher than many blue checks and well-established pundits. And he was very effective with his memes, and that's why he's being arrested. The Department of Justice accuses Mackey of interfering in the election due to a prank meme he put out where he's told black Hillary Clinton supporters to avoid the line, vote by text, and to text this number, which, is clearly they did not get a message that they were voting, that they had actually voted. They got a message from the Hillary Clinton campaign saying, hey, you did not actually vote. Make sure to vote on election day. It was a prank, maybe not necessarily the best idea, but it was in the heat of 2016, it was very common for people to do this. And they've already found evidence of liberals participating in similar manner. Liberal comedian Christina Wong, who we haven't heard about in a very long time, but she was a very active anti-Trump person in 2016 and 2017. But she's one of these people who kind of disappeared, like Louise Mensch or somebody. But she, on around Election Day, was encouraging Trump voters, and she's all up in Trump gear, to vote by text and to text some number. And no federal investigators are going after her. And most of this complaint is dealing with Mackey, or I'm going to call him Ricky Vaughn. Let's remember him as the legend he is. Ricky Vaughn, he's in DM groups, and they're coordinating on memes and how to influence people with their memes. And this is like most of the list. One of the funniest parts is they complain about the Draft Our Daughters meme campaign, which was one of the best. It had these very official looking Hillary Clinton propaganda and had like women in uniform be like, do it for them. Draft our daughters. We want to vote Hillary so we can have a war with Russia. Draft our daughters. And there were some really funny things. There was one clip where Hillary Clinton is talking to Anthony Weiner's wife, and it was like her chief advisor, and she's looking dour, and Hillary Clinton's like, I signed you up. Then it's like, draft our daughters. There's some really good content with that, and this is like clearly satirical. This is protected First Amendment rights. This is a part of free speech. This is the new environment we lived in. They've always had these satirical posts, and everyone got this unless you're completely stupid. And yet they're prosecuting this man because of this. And he faces possibly 10 years in jail due to memes. And this is a big issue. This is the free speech case of our time. The fact that they can just prosecute political dissidents due to the memes that are very effective, that are able to influence the election, they're wanting to punish. And I just remembered Hillary Clinton's Anthony Weiner's wife is Huma Abedin. So that's who was looking dour-faced in that ad. And back to the topic is that they want to go after people, Ricky. They are still mad about the 2016 election. They still don't see it as legitimate. And there's already these news stories about Russian misinformation going around. Like, he spread Russian misinformation. There's no evidence that he was coordinating with Russia or this was Russian misinformation. This is literally just jokes he and his buddies in a DM group came up with. And now they're prosecuting them for election interference, which only the biggest idiots would say is election interference. And the real election interference happened in 2020 when the media colluded with big tech to not talk about the Hunter Biden story. Or they chose to spread lies about Trump. They chose to, hysterically cover the COVID epidemic in a way that hurt Donald Trump. And even like the election interference where like they waited till after the election to announce the vaccine. Bill Barr didn't even announce that there was a Hunter Biden investigation, and maybe that was due to hurt Trump and make sure he didn't win. There is a lot of cases that you could say are clear cases of election interference that went on in 2020. And of course, a lot of what was happening with these votes, there was a new ruling saying that, Virginia accepting a lot of these, late cast mail-in ballots was illegal. They couldn't have done that. And, well, they took it. It's all good. It's 2 months later. We're probably going to see more of these stories where they're like, oh, they did accept ballots and weren't supposed to. But, oh, well. But if you challenge the 2020 election, you may be denied bail, as many of these Capitol protesters are learning that the prosecutors are saying their views are so extreme, which they don't think Biden is legitimate president, that they have to be denied bail. Meanwhile, if you deny the election of the 2016 election, you may run the Justice Department and are able to arrest your political enemies. And that's the world we live in now. So there could be going after other people like Ricky for their free speech. And this is just the party salvo. And this is done by Trump appointees. The lead attorney is somebody who was appointed by Bill Barr, and everybody loved Bill Barr. It's like, oh, Bill Barr is so epic. He's going to really take down the deep state. He's way better than Jeff Sessions. And as we've seen, he was just another deep state toady who put up a good face. And, everyone hated on Jeff Sessions for his recusal. But what Bill Barr did is far worse. He didn't announce that Hunter Biden was under investigation. He's appointing these slugs who are going after people for their free speech and going after Trump supporters. And he did nothing about the election fraud. And he refused to investigate it and refused to press any charges or do anything about what happened in 2020. But he allowed his Justice Department to build up a case against some guy for his memes. So, that's one of the things that we're going to see about this. This is a very important case. Even if you may have thought that what Mr. Ricky Vaughn posted was offensive, it doesn't matter. This is a free speech issue. And if you are on the side of the feds, you are against free speech. And that's the long and short of the matter. But I do want to point out one little thing. This is going to repeat a point I said in the last podcast, is that I said, and I've tweeted this out, is that many on the right have replaced meta politics with meta resentment. And once again, we witnessed this with some of the people in Ricky Vaughn, is that Conservative Inc., which they were never about meta politics anyway, but they're, very happy that Ricky Vaughn's getting arrested because he really hurt their feelings. There's people like Red Stephen Miller, not Stephen Miller from the White House, who was celebrating his arrest. There was Matthew Walther, who is this super contrarian Catholic who used to write for the Free Beacon and now he writes for the Week, who is like saying that it's like important he got arrested because he was actually interfering with the election. He was suppressing the vote, which he wasn't. And those are those people, and like Baseball Crank, Dan McLaughlin, and all these other people were like, this guy's the worst Nazi troll ever. And he's getting indicted. And they're like, yeah, suppress the free speech because this guy made fun of us. So there's one group of people. And there's also people on the right from the Wignat factions who are also celebrating this and saying that it's justified. I think one person who was blowing up my mentions about this was Jason Kessler, the organizer of Charlottesville, who was attacking people who were defending them. And then he was trying to claim that Ricky Vaughn wrote for these odious websites. He's a neo-Nazi propagandist. Like, why are you defending him? He was like so mad that Tucker Carlson would defend Ricky Vaughn. And really what, in that case, it's a matter of sour grapes, is that he's bitter that no one's paying attention to him or his, legal problems, which, the Charlottesville lawsuit is important. And it's like also, deals with a lot of free expression ideas. But it's also, encompassing a lot of the major errors of the people involved. And a lot of these people aren't necessarily the most sympathetic people that are having this. And a lot of what Kessler's problem is him spending all his time attacking people rather than trying to build a coalition to, help him out of this case. He's instead, nitpicking and ankle biting and tagging the FBI to get, people who've made fun of him arrested. And as in this case, I think Ricky Vaughn criticized Charlottesville, so he's really upset about that. So he believes that he should spend 10 years in jail, and that people need to only focus on his case, not on other free speech cases. So there's always these things that people, I've tweeted about this before, is that a lot of people on our side, they care far more about tearing down other elements of the right than advancing their own cause. And in some cases, like when America First is waging war against Conservative Inc., that's something different, because that's a struggle for the heart and soul of the conservative base, and that's actually a real thing on policies. But there's many people that they the only thing they imagine is the people who are right next door to them, who agree with them on 90% of the things, are they share a lot of commonalities, that these are their mortal enemies, and they all side with MSNBC, the federal government, the FBI, Antifa, even Antifa, just so these people will be destroyed. And they don't really gain anything by this, by just being resentful and bitter all the time. It's better to focus on your own issues. And, I think, of course it's not, Ricky Vaughn's case is not the only free speech issue. There is a lot of other things, especially dealing with some of the stuff that happened with Charlottesville. Of course, the federal government, and the government didn't, a lot of the violence is due to the poor response from the government, from the local and state government. And, the feds only seem interested in arresting people from the right who were there. No, but none of the Antifa, and a lot of these people who, there's clear evidence that they were attacking the right wingers who had went, they got let off. They got dropped, their charges dropped. So it's once again showing the double standard. But, just because of that issue, it shouldn't mean that Ricky Vaughn's case is not important. And whatever Ricky Vaughn, if I recall Ricky Vaughn's criticisms of Charlottesville, they were probably legitimate. So, a lot of people need to focus on the bigger issues and stop worrying about their own pettiness. And sure enough, I don't know. I don't think this speech will help people get to that point, but it's just another reminder that too many people are focused on meta resentment rather than meta politics. And we need to move people to get on a more positive direction. So the next big story that happened, of course, is the federal government is speeding up the process to replace Andrew Jackson on the $20 bill and put Harriet Tubman on. And aren't we excited about this? This week, Jen Psaki, White House press secretary, took a question about, what are you doing about Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill? And she said, we're speeding it up. We want to reflect the new diversity of America in this. And everyone's so excited about this, including many conservatives. There was a Washington Post article, saying conservatives are having a rough week, in part because that Harriet Tubman's going on the $20 bill, and every conservative is like, I don't know a single conservative who's upset about this. We love Harriet Tubman, but we want her with a gun on this to own the liberals. Like, hey, don't you hate gun owners? What about this strong black woman? Oh, and once again, they're supporting the erasement of real American heritage and real American history and putting up a figure who is largely mythical and a lot of her exploits are fictional. And we just turned her into a legend because they need black superheroes from our history. Somebody pointed this out to me that, most of this pursuit of these obscure black historical figures is that there's this desire on the part of liberals to find a black Marvel heroine in the past with sassy dialogue. And, Harriet Tubman serves that role. They also have Rosa Parks and a few others. So this is why they want to put her on the $20 bill, and conservatives are all for it and clapping like seals at the prospect of this. But in reality, this is like another example of them erasing American heritage and canceling actual important figures from our history and replacing them with minor figures who aren't really important. And I had another viral tweet this week when I said that Andrew Jackson is an important historical figure. Harriet Tubman is not, and that is factually true. But all these people who have been programmed by primary school education, where they probably spent a whole week learning about Harriet Tubman, they're like, no, that can't be the case. And I had so many stupid responses where saying, we learn about Harriet Tubman in school, so she is important. And all these people, and it's like people who once again had Denver Broncos fan in their bio, or New York Jets fan. It's once again sports sims coming after me the hardest, because these are like the most NPC people that they just eat up all the slop served to them by ESPN and these other media outlets and all this propaganda, and they uncritically accept it and don't question anything that they are told. That's why they're the biggest defenders of the current order and the most outraged when you say something like Robert E. Lee is an American hero or Andrew Jackson is an important historical figure. Harriet Tubman is not. And so all the responses I got were some case of Harriet Tubman was taught in school. Oh, I guess that everything I learned in school was wrong. I was like, yeah, it was. And other people were like, Andrew Jackson's not important. He is a racist. It's like, well, that's not an argument. And then they would say and then they would play up these exaggerations that she freed thousands of slaves. She was the first woman to lead a military raid. None of that is true. First off, every historian who goes into this realizes that everything involving Harriet Tubman is exaggeration and tall tales. And there's no way to corroborate her own perspective, because pretty much the source on all of Harriet Tubman's actions is Harriet Tubman herself, and she was illiterate, and she had a form of mental disorder that they believe is some type of narcolepsy, where she would just pass out for long stretches of time and she would just fall asleep, which, she's considered this, person who freed all these slaves and went on these daring raids. But, if you have that condition, that's going to make it hard. If you're at night and you're wandering around and there's like a slave, there's like a hunting party nearby and you're about to fall asleep for 20 minutes, that's not going to help your party. And also this form of narcolepsy also gave her these hallucinations and visions that could have, upset her mental state and possibly made her believe that real actions that occurred didn't actually occur because, they were a result of her hallucinations. So, but nobody's ever going to advance this story. But there are several mainstream historians who, put a damper on the Harriet Tubman myth. And none of these people are necessarily conservative. James McPherson, who's arguably the foremost expert on the Civil War, wrote a very famous book about the war, Battle Cry of Freedom, which I actually recommend all my listeners to get a copy of that. It'll probably be in your local library. It's very good. It's a very good general introduction to the Civil War era. He's one of the people who doubts a lot of the Harriet Tubman, and this is somebody who's like very respectable. I don't think there's anybody who can really claim to have a higher regard in the academia than in Civil War era topics than James McPherson. He was even a critic of the 1619 Project. He's pretty liberal, but he's like a centrist. Here's what he said in a 2004 essay about Harriet Tubman. Many of the incidents of her life as a slave, as a fugitive escaping to freedom, and as the Moses who returned repeatedly to lead others out of bondage are derived from her own testimony and often impossible to corroborate from other sources. Problems of evidence present formidable obstacles to a biographer's intent on sifting reality from myth. And one of the things he found out is that, they claim that she's the Moses of her people, but the only people that she is allegedly rescued were relatives of her, and they were not, going into the far reaches of the Deep South. They were just going into Maryland, which was on the border of on the Mason-Dixon line. And that's, it's still a feat, but it's not necessarily worthy of her making her one of the most important historical figures in American history. And this is also shared by many of her biographers, that this skepticism toward her life story. Tubman biographer Milton Surnett, who is a emeritus historian of Syracuse University, when he was researching her, he had this to say: "It gradually dawned on me that much of what we as Americans thought we knew about Harriet Tubman was not derived from good historical research, but was a perpetuation of a larger-than-life story. The symbol had overpowered the life, had overshadowed the historical person." So this is not me, right-wing extremists, saying this. These are some of the most esteemed historians, and what they teach in public school is, the larger-than-life legends and about this raid. The funniest is this raid that she supposedly did on South Carolina, where she led a black regiment and they destroyed Confederate outposts and freed hundreds of slaves. And she may have been involved in that, but she certainly did not lead that. And everyone's like, this is total fantasy. And they really try to be circumspect about this because they don't want to upset the Harriet Tubman legend too much. Because it is useful to their cause to claim that this black woman had a tremendous impact on American history. So it's ultimately this, that like, yeah, well, she, served in the Union as a nurse and occasionally as a scout, and she may have been involved in some of the, helping escaped slaves, go to a, free state. She's not necessarily of this like important figure who's leading hundreds, and was like a badass Marvel superhero, and who was like some slave owner's like, "You can't take my slaves," and then she's like points a gun and is like, "Yes, I can, boy," and then she like shoots him, and that's the public perception, is that this like badass black woman who's like drawing guns on evil white racists and they're getting shot, like, "Oh no!" And that's like what the public perception of it is. But the only evidence, even from her own story, the only people she ever pulled a gun on was the blacks she was trying to help escape. And they're like, "I'm not quite sure about your plan." And she'd point a gun at them, threaten to shoot them. She did not point a gun at any evil white racists, according to her own story, which may not be accurate as all, as they were saying that they cannot find other sources to support it besides herself. Harriet Tubman's elevation is another sign that, we can't honor any great white American heroes prior to Jimmy Carter. That pretty much they're all tainted by racism. There's going to be some statement they made that means that they can no longer be worthy of veneration. So we have to find these random black figures, and those are the only people we can see as our founders and our true Americans. And that's really the point of 1619 Project, is the 1619 Project, erases or places whites as the villains of American history, and then blacks are the true protagonists, and they're the ones who really created American freedom, not the founding fathers. And we shouldn't really honor the founding fathers anymore, or figures like Andrew Jackson, who is nearly as important as they. His many achievements, he helped conquer much of the territory that we have today. He was a hero. He was actually a genuine badass, unlike Harriet Tubman. He experienced, and a lot of the people who were attacking me used to like, Harriet Tubman was courageous, Andrew Jackson wasn't. I was like, as a little kid, he challenged a British officer and was like slashed by a saber from that officer during the Revolution. He participated in numerous duels. Many of these duels nearly cost him his life. I mean, he took a bullet in one duel just so he could kill the opponent. He was engaged in numerous battles throughout his life, and even living in Tennessee as a young man, when he traveled, he had to worry about Indian attacks, and many times they, had to forego sleeping throughout the night to avoid being butchered by Indian attacks. So there is like somebody who dealt with much violence and much danger throughout his life, and I don't think he was at all a coward, or certainly had courage. I mean, even when an assassin tried to kill him as president, he instead, beat the man with his cane. So I don't think this is somebody I don't think there's been any president or really many other figures with as much physical courage as Andrew Jackson. But as part of the propaganda, they can only think that courage is an exclusive trait to non-whites. Whites can't have that unless they're standing up for non-white interests. So Andrew Jackson has to be taken out of public life. We can no longer venerate him. We have to have these other figures, and we're eventually just going to be left with what public education teaches us, and it's just Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth. That's it. There you go. Those are here. Those are American heroes. Those are the people who invented George Washington Carver. Of course, we can't forget the guy who invented peanut butter, and who supposedly invented peanut butter. So those are the people that we're all going to learn about. And anything that is dealing with the founding fathers, we have to talk about how they're involved in slavery, or said not nice things about Indians, or and even like somebody like Abraham Lincoln, you would have thought was in that story. All they're going to talk about is how he executed Indians during the Civil War. So that's going to be American history from now on. You can look down on, see the $20 bill. You can see Harriet Tubman staring back at you, and you can say, "Hey, this is my country. This is what the only people I'm allowed to venerate, and they cannot look like me if I'm a part of the historic American nation." So that's maybe not the most pleasing thought, but it is something to say that to final thoughts is that people, the average American, that is truly the NPC meme with this, is that these people are so upset by anything that they hear that may disturb what they're told to believe by Marvel superhero movies, and what their second grade teacher taught them, that they really cling to it. And this actually goes against how we imagine ourselves, is that every American imagines that they came to their beliefs through rational analysis and inquiry, that they're not like all the other people, that they don't teach this in school, that Harriet Tubman's a hero, that that's the only thing they teach in school. And I had several people who were trying to claim this, that they only think about what was taught them in school. It was like, they didn't teach that Andrew Jackson was a hero in many schools, but they do teach a lot about Harriet Tubman. But they want to have this belief that they're like a unique individual who's like breaking through the bubble and the lies, and they're coming to what the mainstream consensus is on every topic. But they have this illusion that they're actually thinking this through individual inquiry, and this isn't just what they learned in primary school. So that's very hard to get through to these people. That's something to keep in mind. And the second point I want to say is that this is another example of showing that how much this system does not want the historic American nation to not see itself in the current state. That this is not really your country anymore. If you're descended from the if you're an actual Native American, as I pointed out that Andrew Jackson was a Native American because he was a descendant of the European settlers who invented the concept of America, and thus he would be a Native American. Is that that's how the term was used up until after World War II, is that the Native American referred to the descendants of the European settlers who were here by the time of the Revolution. Now it's no longer like that, but they are the genuine Native Americans because there was no America before them. They created it. The Indians did not have a concept of America, and they saw themselves as outside of the American polity. Thus, they cannot be claimed a right to Native Americans. They're indigenous to the land, but they're not Native Americans because that implies that they invented the state and the concept of America, which they did not. That comes from the European settlers. I am very much about reappropriating Native American for our side. Not letting the Indians have exclusive claim to it because it really shouldn't apply to them. It applies to us. But, that's a topic for, I'll explore that topic in many other episodes. But the final one is for these Native Americans, for these heritage Americans, that they're, not allowed to venerate their heroes. When they look around at statues and at their currency, they cannot see people that look like them or that honor their heroes, and they have to be taught in their history lessons that they're the villains of American history. Their only purpose is to pedestal non-whites and to see them as the real heroes of our story, and only non-whites can realize the true freedom and liberty promised in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And this is just another facet of that. So they're not going to stop with Andrew Jackson. They're going to continue on, and eventually you'll see the calls to replace. There's already calls to replace Thomas Jefferson, and they know that George Washington may be a bridge too far right now, but that'll probably be the next figure, and it'll even be Abraham Lincoln. They took down a statue of Abraham Lincoln in Boston because it was degrading towards slaves, and many of the Antifa protests throughout the summer vandalized Abraham Lincoln statues. So no white figure in American history is safe. Maybe William Garrison. I don't know. We'll have to see who they allow for us to honor in the future. Now on to Patreon questions, which, due to the censorship push against highly respected, I don't know necessarily sure how long we'll have the Patreon left, but we will come up with a solution soon enough. But for the time being, Patreon is safe, so you can still answer your questions. And if you would like to get in a question before the purge happens, you can, of course, sign up for the Patreon option at Highly Respected's Patreon. This question comes from Tom, and it's actually based on a tweet. Well, I love when people ask questions about tweet. He's asked, Scott, you tweeted about how Michael Flynn's brother shouldn't have kept serving in the military. Don't you think that it's more advantageous for him to stay in? Well, this is a great question. As I tweeted out that, the brother of Michael Flynn, Charles Flynn, got another promotion in the military, which it's a good thing. It's good that somebody like that who comes from a conservative family, probably has conservative beliefs, is rising up in the military. At the same time, this dude's brother was entirely destroyed by the people who Charles Flynn takes orders from. It's like many of the same people from the Pentagon, the Deep State, CIA, all these people who conspired to destroy Michael Flynn and to cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and his whole reputation based on lies and false evidence. And then he just sits there and salutes them, and he takes orders from them. And there is something to say. It's like, okay, yeah, it's good that he's elevating that we do have people like that in the military. I understand that point. But, he's probably not going to rise up that high. He's not going to be a joint chief. He's probably not going to be a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's still pretty high. He's now commander of the Pacific Theater, or the head of Pacific Command. That is nothing to shake your... That is a pretty high up command. And people were pointing out, like, well, he'll not be, he'll be able to avoid, tamp down on woke stuff, he'll like all their initiatives, but he really can't resist it. He really can't reform the military from that perspective. And at the end of the day, there is something odd about, like, you're still taking orders from the system that destroyed your family and destroyed your brother for no good reason at all. Just they saw him as a political enemy, and they would do the same to him if he, stopped taking orders or, went off a little bit off the reservation. And they already hated Michael Flynn for the fact that he went against the deep state as head of DIA. And, that he wanted us to pull out of Afghanistan, as the Afghanistan paper showed. He was like very critical of what we were doing there. And they didn't like that he was supporting Trump. So, if this guy went anywhere off the reservation, he'd be considered an enemy, and they would do the same to him as they did to his brother. So I don't know. It's not necessarily saying that, like, if you're in the military, yeah, you have to get out. Like, don't serve this slave system. But it is like something very strange for a guy who has a very personal connection to the evil perpetuated by the system and what they do to people they deem as political enemies. It was like, imagine if like Ricky Vaughn's brother was like, was like a serious general in the military, and then he just like kept serving. And it's like he's seeing what his government is doing to his family for speaking their mind, or having a different opinion from the liberal elites, and this is what they do to them. So it's not necessarily challenging. It'd be good to have somebody like that. If he's still in the military and there's somebody a really good Republican who comes through in 2024. And, he's there to be elevated, that would be good, to like say, hey, let's make this guy defense secretary, and he has the clout and the ability to go through that. And, nobody's going to, clearly anytime you nominate a general for defense secretary, they just easily make it through. So that could be a good thing about him. But I think it's very weird for somebody to just continue on to serve, is that this is like somebody who's seeing like the evil perpetuated by the system, and seeing like what they will do to people who they see as enemies. And you still take orders. I mean, people have to do that with many of their jobs, but I don't know. I just find it odd. And some people are like, well, there's no advantage to him resigning, but I don't know. There is something like a political statement to say that, like, I won't continue to serve what people did to my brother. But probably Michael Flynn, who still has a blinkered view of the military, doesn't really see the military as a part of the deep state and as a part of the power structure that destroyed him. Probably encouraged his brother to stay. But, this is like showing that, like, a lot of people don't want to give up on what they see as the real America, and they don't want to. It's very tough for them to like really see things that they associate with the positive aspects about about America, such as the military, and to see that in a negative light and see that as complementary to, what the deep state is, what the liberal establishment is, and it's very tough for them to get over that. So that's all my point with that. Of course, I'm not in the Flynn family, but it's still very strange, and I think most people would agree with that. So that is all the time we have for today on Highly Respected. I should have the non-political episode up next week. Hopefully there's no big breaking news that will upset that, and we can have our very special guests on. That should be up on Wednesday. We should also have a RSS feed up at that time. I'll have to see. It'll take me some time, so maybe it may just be only the new episodes that go up on the RSS feed. We'll have to see. So I will keep you posted. And until next time, stay respected.